4th day of January 2023. Hope everybody's doing good on this Wednesday. I'm Dana Durnford, and I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. And you can feel free to call in at 709-589-4406. We're off and running. We got a poll for everybody tonight. It's today, my time. It's 4 p.m. my time. Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? And the answer is yes, and I can quantify that in a second for you. In a second. One second is already gone, Dana. We'll start quantifying. Hang on. I'm only human. Here we go. Quantifying. First off, why are they faking being in a nuclear reactor? What's the point of that? I'll show you the point. And it brings to the forefront the idea of extermination. This is 20-day model, 19 days, this part right here, of radioactive fallout covering the entire planet. There's not a single species on the entire planet that has an autoimmune trigger to defend against anthropogenic man-made radiation. It's completely different from the stuff that's created by the sun. We call it man-made because the solar system doesn't make these types of isotopes, despite the deceit and deception. So reactor 4 and decades of reactor cores in the two pools are gone. And same thing for reactor 3. Decades of reactor cores, and the massive core of reactor 3 was mixed oxide fuel. This is the evil of evil when it comes to fuel. It's illegal in Canada and the United States because it's so hideously, monstrously evil. They were lost. And that's why you see this model is only based upon venting. It's not based upon the actual inventories from the fuel pools and the reactor cores that were ejected into your environment. This is a catastrophic event for all species. And there's many, many studies to quantify this poll. Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? And just one more piece of that puzzle. Bear with me. Almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. And they know from all the studies available that food sucks up the radiation. You eat it and get sick and die. Just a single particle, hot particle, everything from the meltdown is a hot particle, cause you cancer, but there's 1,800 other illnesses and diseases. And so it's no coincidence that all the plants are surrounded by farms. These are genocide machines. This is not accidental genocide machines. These are genocide machines. And this is why you see the media mocking you for 80 years with deceit and dishonesty, and even going as far as pretending they're in a building that doesn't even exist at Fukushima in order to stop you from being able to protect your planet. And the female species of the planet in particular are 4 times more vulnerable than males. I'm going to do a recap of 2022. We're in March. We're up to January the 16th area when they had a massive earthquake. They covered that up. And the problem with the earthquake is the remains of the reactors are so fragile, you can start another chain reaction, have another plumes covering the entire planet. It's still going on. All fuel pools worldwide are creating those same plumes, by the way. And you just have to bear with me for 1 second. I'll bring the poll back up for a second. I forgot to bring my screen a bit closer. once you hook up the Geiger counter and sync it up with the screen, I'm supposed to pull the screens I'm going to be reading from in closer to me. Voila! We're back in business. Hope everybody's ready to go, because we are. And on this show, we got even worse. The censorship is desperate, isn't it? We got 5 people on the show today that I've been doing for a decade. Because the truth is not allowed to be seen. If you're lucky enough to find it, you are very fortunate. The economic toll of the earthquake that struck the coast of Tokyo is likely to be in the billions. It was right off the coastline of the melted multiple reactors. It didn't damage them, but it destroyed or cracked open around 5,000 schools further inland. The earthquake had an intensity of 5 plus on Japan's seismic intensity scale, according to that particular media, which you got to multiply by 1.428, 571,429, and that's an 8 on the international scale earthquake, but it was actually worse than that. Department of Energy funds, and so there's a bunch of news stories. What we're doing is we're going to shoot through a recap of the headlines mostly. There's some stories where I'll go a little bit tiny in depth, but we already covered this in March, right? But we're doing a recap, and so you're basically going to get a week or 2 weeks of news from 5 days a week in a single presentation. Department of Energy funds a new program to recycle used nuclear fuel, which is illegal in America. The former Secretary of the Nuclear Waste, Sam Bristow, who got fired for shoplifting or for stealing luggage from an airport on 2 different airports, he helped push this bill through for recycling used fuel, which is MOX fuel. And typical nuclear reactor, the elements are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. If you put it through a chain reaction, again, it's 2 billion times 2 billion more toxic. The fuel pools, when you put the stuff in the fuel pools, there's no containment. Some deficiencies reported at nuclear plants. This was the cover story. I think they said there was like 2 liters of water spilled from one of the fuel pools that don't actually exist. Located in relatively close proximity to the fault, it was 30 kilometers away, actually. 60 kilometers. Yeah, this one was 60. The year before it was 30. The force of the quake reportedly moved some of the tanks up to 10 centimeters. 10 centimeters. The tanks that they're talking about are actually empty. They were all built in 2013, every one of them. And the idea was to make you complacent to think that the radiation wasn't going into the ocean. Also at the Daiichi site, a cooling pump at Unit 5 spent fuel pool temporarily stopped working. Reactor 5, as far as I know, does have fuel in the pool. That's probably the only true story you'll get from the nuclear industry for this month. One of the 4 transmission lines supplies off-site power to the Daini site was also lost as a result of the quake. The Daini site is 10 kilometers south. It's the evil twin of Fukushima Daiichi. We're going to have to shoot through some of this because we can't cover all of it. We won't get anywhere. Japan's public-private sector should check preparation for quake damage. Quake damage was felt in 1,000 kilometers away. It injured at least 200 people, including Tokyo, 220 kilometers away. Is maximum intensity scale of upper 6 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, but they don't put 7 there. They just call it the Japan seismic intensity scale. Not very deceitful or dishonest at all. Let me tuck this in. And upper 6 of Japan's seismic intensity scale of 7. Urge the public remain vigilant against more earthquakes, which means this is a serious earthquake when you're talking about aftershocks. More than 2.2 million households, 2.2 million holes, primarily in the Kanto region, including Tokyo, suffered blackout, but the earthquake was right off the coast from multiple nuclear meltdowns and everything was perfectly fine there. There was 1,000 places on the railway tracks they had to fix, but the ground zero where the nuclear meltdowns happened to be too, everything was fine there. There was numerous incidences of fires breaking out. There was... Let's keep her going here. This was 2 days. There was a lot of news. We're not going to get through it in detail like we're doing at this moment. Traffic lights were down. Fukushima #1 nuclear plant, which is the Daiichi plant, March the 17th. This was the day after the quake. They're showing you pictures, old pictures, by the way, of Reactor 4. In the first hour, media came out and said there was nothing wrong at Fukushima. Everything is good. Of course, these are massive sites. You can't quantify an assertion like that. The ambassador to Japan was visiting, and I can't even remember what that story is about. Oh, this was during Operation Tomodachi. This is where 16 American or more ships went in to do rescue efforts and were severely irradiated. All the jets or helicopters had to have their jet engines or their engines replaced because of radiation. To provide food, water, they were talking about Operation... Again, I'm going to have to go through this after, and all while being dusted by fallout. When you're being dusted, you're breathing it and consuming it. It's in your clothing, your hair, it's everywhere. Calling it dusted is unbelievable, despicable thing to connotation to put in. This is there's no such thing as being dusted. You're being radiated with significant adverse contaminated soil piles up in vast Fukushima cleanup project. Remember, this was the 11th anniversary, 2022. Growing food outdoors in a nuclear wasteland where there's multiple ongoing nuclear reactors melting down. And a lot of these are exclusion zones. You don't have to be that smart to know that this is absurdness. The central and local government are hoping to attract new residents to the nuclear wasteland by offering $17,000 US to anyone who makes the move. Yeah, you can move it to a nuclear wasteland. We give you $17,000. Disgusting parasites. Japan government already spent $43 billion on decontamination. $43 billion on 3% of the single prefecture. The food was banned, by the way, from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. It's and when I'm doing this kind of recap, it's so hard for me not to try to do the whole story because it's so important, right? 1,000 trucks each day dumping around 7,000 bags of soil. They got 13 million one-ton bags in that area. There's somewhere between 30 million, which was 2015 number of one-ton bags. Crews are sorting the material at a facility. They're sorting through bags of radioactive waste. Crews, a.k.a. homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, to separate what can be burnt. So they're talking dirty bombs. That's probably one of the most important headlines from last year, by the way. Hard reality mixes in Japantown wrecked by disaster. Hope and hard realities mixed in Japanese town. This is Futaba. This is 2 kilometers south of ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns, for goodness sake. That's abandoned. ABC News from Australia. Mari Yamaguchi, a notorious genocide mouthpiece for the nuclear industry. We've been following her since 2011. She's the official narrative for the propaganda. And they're talking about Fukubar, but calling it, so they open up a little section of Fukubar community where a couple of people, they say, can move back to. Now, you can't cross the street. You can't go to the other gardens. Or when you drive in town, you can't stop anywhere. You got to go right to that property they said is clean. But in a nuclear wasteland with multiple reactors 2 kilometers away still hemorrhaging into the environment, there is no safe way. There is no way to clean it up. It took them 7 years just to get back into the control room. This community is not evacuated because it's cleaned up. It's evacuated because it's a nuclear wasteland. And I'd like to cover every inch of this, but we can't. We'll get to the earthquake stories, hopefully. Sometimes when I'm importing all of this, because you're putting in a whole month in each section, right? And you're doing 20 shows a month, I accidentally might screw up and put them in the wrong spots. We'll get through it. Disaster relief in Fukushima sprouts seeds of new research. See, you shouldn't be doing any research in a nuclear wasteland for typical businesses. If you're there to study the nuclear disease factory, that's one thing, but they're never going to do it. Researchers toiled with Fukushima villagers to think up a farmer-friendly way to reduce the radioactive cesium from the agricultural soil. So let me run that by in plain language. Researchers went to the nuclear wasteland where they didn't evacuate the victims and brainstormed with the victims, allegedly, brainwashed the victims and getting them to believe they're thinking up a farmer-friendly way. There should be no farms in a radioactive nuclear wasteland, period, ever, again. You can't reclaim it. You can't get it back. It's assimilated into everything on top of that, and it's still hemorrhaging out of the reactor. But to make that statement right there, they went back to the nuclear wasteland to make the farmers feel like they weren't poisoning everybody by making shit up. Where are the parents of these monsters, really? The town officials don't even live in those communities. They live in different communities. And nuclear power can be part of the energy solution if we can get over our fear of radiation. Well, the fear of radiation, this is why we have terrorist laws for man-made anthropogenic radiation, because it's so harmful. The fear is justified. And saying solar and wind are expensive and inefficient, nuclear is only 2 or 3% efficient for starters. Nuclear is the most inefficient thing. It needs 2 dedicated gas, oil, coal plants dedicated to the nuclear site for the rest of its life, to build it, to run it, and for 60 years to decommission it. And to make that statement is a typical of a moron, bootlick, and don't care about anything, only promoting disease factories like nuclear. Nuclear is nothing but disease factories. Coming back might have been a mistake 11 years after Fukushima. Not might. People didn't even leave. We have a big list of communities that were never evacuated with absurd numbers. And they're only acknowledged in cesium, for goodness sakes. And so people having regrets. All of these stories we covered in March. And this is Fukushima again they're talking about. And they always talk about tourists. They built a museum there for $50 million, a couple of kilometers away from multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns, so they can say each year they had this many people visit the region. But they weren't. They were sucked in and manipulated and deceived and coerced into going to ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. And so this year they're going to roll out the dumping of the ocean. They need to get rid of me. I'm the only thing out there that's running an educational program, unfortunately. The idea was to create 1 million little bastards just like me, very articulated and not going to take any shit. And that's bye-bye nuke time. But what you're seeing with the nuclear industry is just posturing anyway. Right? There's no substance behind the assertions they're making of a renaissance. There's zero. And the small modular reactors don't even exist. We got major censorship again tonight, because the truth doesn't matter at all, does it? So this model is based on 16 days of radioactive fallout when it stops. Do you see where you live anywhere in this model? Are you in a safe zone? Do you think the plume just disappears after 16 days? Do you think it stopped coming out almost 12 years later? Do you think this plume doesn't exist anymore? Because even if it was just a continuous plume covering the whole planet a single time, it doesn't go away forever. Read it and weep. If they let it run for 70 and everything's yellow, and if they actually put the inventories that were lost into it, and so the poll tonight is asking you that question. Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? And the only proper answer is yes. There is no other answer. Somebody accidentally said no, or the pro-nuclear community, the people who are censoring you, said no. The amount of compensation was finalized and blah, 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 blah. There is no compensation for being permanently lethally poisoned. It could take a decade or a year or 10, 20 years, but you got poisoned. And your children did too, and your friends and your families and your loved ones, and your beautiful, wonderful planet, the only one you got, has been irreparably destroyed through the slow kill of radioactive fallout. Tragedy avoided, quake hit, derailed, and lessons learned. It was 900, I think it was. The bullet train, you can kind of see the bullet train is derailed in that picture. I think this was one of the first pictures. There's better pictures. It was 180 injured across 12 prefectures. 180 across 12 prefectures. But ground zero where the nuclear plants were, there was no, which are very fragile because of the nuclear meltdowns and detonations. Everything was okay, Dana. Radiochemical analysts of drain water samples of exhaust stacks by Unit 1 and 2 of Fukushima. This is the exhaust stacks. I can't remember this study. This is February 2022. And they don't acknowledge reactor 3 in that. They talk about venting. Of course, once the tsunami ripped out 680 kilometers of the coastline, there was no venting. The sample waters of the drain pit of the exhaust was checked for cesium, cobalt, strontium instead of the actual real emissions. Let me see what they got, numbers they got there. Or was this just propaganda? We know it's 25 sieverts by the stacks. They're talking about cesium, which is disgusting that they do stuff like that. I'm just seeing if they're going to acknowledge it in this study. I don't see it there. And inside of the stacks was mainly contaminated by the venting of Unit 1. They can't quantify it because it's a lethal dose. You actually can't get close to it. If they did get samples, it was done remote controlly. It wasn't done by a human. It's at least 25 sieverts by the base of the stacks. And these are outside the building. There is nothing left of the building, yet they're pretending they're inside of it. So you don't appreciate the whole planet is pulsing energy every second for millions of years. Does that look like it's 190 feet to you? Here, eat some of that. That'll make you feel better. Grown food right alongside of multiple thousands of one-ton bags of radiation in a no-go zone. Here was a headline. Seniors urged to eat Fukushima rice to help the farmers and protect the young people. So instead of arresting the farmers for growing poison food, they say we should kill all the seniors to protect the children so they don't accidentally eat the poison. This is Japan Times. It's the same thing as CBS in America or BBC in UK or CBC in Canada or ABC in Australia. The major government media is coming out and saying, well, we had a nuclear accident. All the elderly should eat, the people that worked all their fucking life, excuse the language, should eat the radiation rice and get sick and fucking die. That's what they're saying to people. So any culture that doesn't respect the elderly and has that kind of contempt for them is not a culture. There's nothing good ever going to come out of that. We're not going to go through all of these headlines because we're trying to cover just stories. We'll flash through it for a bit of fun. Does that look like fun to you? 919,000 becquerels, atomic decays per square meter. 4,000 becquerels in the recent fog per kilogram of just cesium gamma. 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. So when you cover the whole planet with the radioactive fallout like I showed you, then it's pretty obvious the nuclear power plants are designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout, just like it done to Japan. So Japan wants you to think none of this happened. Everything is in the tanks. That's what Japan wants you to believe. Don't be gullible. Don't be naive. Don't be a victim to the despicable, disgusting, cowardly nuclear industry. And when they have an accident, they raise the safe limits 75 times for children. How can you sit in silence when something like that actually exists, when that kind of evil is prevalent, when that's the norm in the nuclear industry, and children with 11 becquerels a kilogram start to see heart problems, for goodness sakes? What does it take for you to fight back? I know what it took for me. Reality. And we're going to bring you a great big fucking dose of that today. IAEA today admitted there's no such thing as a safe level of radiation. What are you talking about? That the standards they got are based on natural stuff, not anthropogenic man-made. In other words, the International Atomic Energy Agency, aka not that at all, they're the military-industrial complex from the United Nations. They're just another part of the military, which is UN, 195 militaries. 2 sieverts of better radiation from a single liter of water means if that was actually in those tanks, you can't walk past those tanks in your paper suits. And when TEPCO says they burn 7,000 paper suits a day. Like what's 7,000 people going to do on that site? The study's doing external dose, not internal. External. National Institute of Radiological Science only doing external doses, not internal doses. That's not deceptive at all, is it? In other words, you don't have a university or a media on the entire planet you can turn to. Not one. And you don't have an academic of any discipline with a dissenting voice out there, except for me. And you that are participating. You know, they're claiming it doesn't look like that, and it doesn't look like that. And that they got all the fuel out of the pool, which would have been 100 feet above the wreckage. What are you going to believe? You're going to believe the evidence, or you're going to believe the propaganda that they're telling you? I know, like Dana, you're not a professor at a university. I heard that before, okay? Thank goodness I'm not, because if I was, you would never know anything I'm showing you. External doses for an event like that covers the whole planet in radioactive fallout. How did we ever get to this point? Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Mass extinction around the world. Kind of the reason we got this poll tonight. Are nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the plant with radioactive fallout? That model is Noah's model, by the way. And that connotation is major media's. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. Well, we done the research expeditions. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening. And Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, both of them, they claim they got fuel out of the pool, but that's what the buildings actually look like. There is no fuel pools or reactor cores. They were completely destroyed and released into the environment as a genocide plume, as a death plume that covers the planet, as a doomsday machine. Japan's earthquake knocks out power to millions, but it didn't shake these fragile buildings and cause any more damage. Can you believe that? It was 60 kilometers off the coastline. The earthquake had to travel past that to do all the damage. and the area devastated by a much larger quake in 2011. At a depth of 40 miles and 60 kilometers off the coastline, they lost power for millions of homes far, far away. But ground zero, no big deal. You have no concept, if you're new to this subject, and they're not censoring me because they're bored. I can guarantee you that. The industry is not known for... Huge Japan earthquake triggers tsunami alert. Again, they use the word tsunami. This wasn't on a fault line where the continental shelves can drop, right? Even if it's on the land, they'll say, no tsunami. Let's get through this. And beware of possible strong aftershocks over the next week. This was a 9.5 on the scale. All the lights are rattling. I didn't shoot the video. I probably got it there somewhere. A massive 7.3. It was... We'll get to it in a minute anyway. The train was between Fukushima and the city of Shiroshi when it derailed. And this was the tsunami warning, right? Not the earthquake. But there was no tsunami. We'll get there. There was a lot of headlines on the 16th and the 17th. We'll take up most of one of these shows to get through, no doubt. Powerful 7.3 magnitude earthquake shakes northern Japan. Powerful. This was the original headlines, obviously. 36 miles below the sea. So this is early. As we start shifting through this, you'll start seeing the details showing up. 7.3. Well, if you divide 7 into 10, you get 1.428. And so their scale was upper 6, which is a 9.4 on the Richter scale. Upper 6 in Japan's seismic Shindu scale of 7. So which when you divide it and multiply it, it's a 9.4 earthquake on your scale. The scale, they say, is designed to get the lateral movements, but it's actually designed to manipulate you and deceive you. The original earthquake, they used the Richter scale, and this one they only use... Powerful earthquake hits northern Japan, tsunami advisory alerted. Again, they keep that out there so you don't think about the actual damage that's going on. You don't think about... And this is right off the coast of Fukushima Prefecture. As we start moving, 6 plus on Japan's seismic intensity scale is 7, which means it's over a 6.5. Which puts it over a 9 on your earthquake scales. But it had to go past the nuclear power plant to cause all the damage and the fragile reactors. They say no issues there. Powerful earthquake. I'm just looking for... Well, we should move forward on it. 7.3. They're saying 7.3 on the Richter scale, 6.5 plus on the Shinzu Japanese scale. Well, you can't have two separate scales for the same earthquake, for goodness sakes. So now when you look at it, what do you see? See the upper 6? Oh, wait. So the upper 6 is prevalent, right? Entire prefectures. And lower 6, which is an 8 plus earthquake in Miyagi and the other surrounding communities. So symmetrically, you had an upper 6. The scale only goes to 7. So when you look at 7 color, that was actually a 7 for the Fukushima prefecture. So for those prefectures and all the yellow, the 5 lower, 5 upper, 4s, these are huge earthquakes on the international scale. So it shook half the country. But ground zero, where the reactors are, and where it first comes to shore, no problem at all. me bring up that picture because I want you to understand the madness later on. I got to put that where I can find it. I screwed it up or what? I got to put that where I can find it in a minute if I accidentally end up back on the other window. So it damaged the whole, half the country shook, but these reactors behind me, they still look like that. They got covers over it, and they're pretending that everything is perfect on the inside of it. There we go again. Okay, I got that. Japan's earthquake knocked out power to millions, but it didn't bother that. You see the ludicrous of the story? Including the area devastated. Again, they regurgitate the same story. So when I'm originally gathering up stuff like this, I'm looking for patterns, and I'm looking for confirmations that they're talking about the Japanese scale. And you might have to go through 30 stories before you finally get to them acknowledging that it's the Japanese scale. And then all of a sudden you get a whole bunch of stories. This will happen later in the cycle, right? 8 hours later or something. But then what you found out was over the next week or 2 weeks, the damage starts showing up. This earthquake caused over $5 billion in insurance claims. But it had no adverse effects on ground zero where it came ashore. Do you really believe that? You have any concept of the significance of that having releasing plumes for all the species on the planet? I hope you do. Plunging 2 million homes into darkness. Tokyo area into darkness. Tokyo, 220 kilometers away. 36 miles below the sea. A little bit shallower again. There's very shallow earthquakes, right? Tokyo, where buildings shook violently. So the buildings in Tokyo, 200 kilometers away, were shaken violently. But this was okay at ground zero. And you can go back through the archive of my videos to March the 16th, where I think it was on a Saturday, where I'd done a whole presentation on Saturday and then again on Sunday, and then covered it voraciously in those couple of days with supporting documentations about how they'd done that before. This is not the first time they lied about these massive earthquakes, by the way, at all. And so we're originally looking for patterns, we're looking for documentation, and we found it. What did I do there? Oh yeah, we're good. Keep her going. And train was between Fukushima and the city of... This was the bullet train. Now, it came out over the next number of days. You won't see it yet. There was over almost 1,000 places where the tracks had to be repaired. But ground zero, where the earthquake came ashore, despite the fact it shook skyscrapers violently in Tokyo, 220 kilometers away, these very fragile, brittle reactors had no adverse effects whatsoever. It is absurd to suggest it. It's absurd. This is why no nuclear scientists have ever went to Fukushima nuclear meltdown site. Powerful 7.3 magnitude earthquake shakes northern Japan. So this was the original headlines. And we were looking for patterns. Because we know that over days the story will come out, right? But originally you were trying to figure out what's going on here. So 1.428 is a 9.428. Estimated upper 6 in Japan's seismic intensity scale is 7. So they don't do 6.1, 6.2, 6.3 like that. They do 6, 6.5, and 7, for instance, right? Which is, so this was the confirmation that I was looking for originally, which justified me then doing an emergency broadcast. Because now you're going to assume a plume is going to hit North America in the next 5 or 6 days. Because now you have confirmation. They're calling it upper 6 Because a 6 doesn't sound bad to the average person who doesn't understand the big picture. But it's not on a scale of 10, it's on a scale of 7. So when you multiply it, it's a 9.4. Now that's a friggin' vicious earthquake, 35 miles deep, 60 kilometers off the coastline, of multiple melted reactors that are extremely fragile and will definitely cause a recriticality and maybe a release that will continue for another year if it had stopped at all. And it's not just these 2 reactors. There was 4 fuel pools in those 2 reactors, and there was 2 other reactors, 1 and 2 with 4 fuel pools each. So 8 fuel pools, 4 reactors that we know, we can prove. It's incontestable that these had melted down and lost the entire inventories. Or in the case of reactor 3, it was ejected right into the environment, which was the thumbnail for the show, right? But also the common spent fuel pool was right behind reactor 4. The tsunami would have ran right through it. It would have needed the cooling or it would melt down. It would have had reactor cores from all 6 reactors. Then in 2020, in January, there was 739 pictures released randomly on the anniversary of the 10th anniversary, March, or just before March, and I've done a presentation. You can find that in my playlist of these pictures, 739 or 736 pictures, whatever it was. And in order to give you context so you can be informed now and make informed decisions based upon documentation instead of propaganda that you're going to find if you go looking on your own. So you had a 9.4 bash this site. Never done no damage, but violently shook buildings 220 kilometers away in Tokyo. Does anybody actually believe that really is how it played out? Because if you don't believe that's how it played out, then you got to assume you got poisoned again, which is the inherent problem with nuclear. It keeps coming back to haunt a million generations. Powerful earthquake hits northern Japan. Again, these tsunamis, right, are very, it grabs the people's imagination and they forget about the danger also that's going on with the nuclear meltdowns. And you can't fault them because the indoctrination machine is prolific worldwide. A 6+ on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of 0 to 7 in parts of Miyagi, Fukushima Prefecture. Now, I showed you the model there a little while ago. It'll show up again and again over a period of time. 7.3 earthquake. 7.3 earthquake hits, and then we're looking for confirmation 60 kilometers below the surface, looking for any kind of pictures. Powerful earthquake strikes off the coastline. So when I'm initially gathering up, I'm going to grab every story, everything, and I'm going to look for documentation like this where the scales, you got half the country. That's actually over half the country. You got Hokkaido up in the top, the island's shaking. Remember, they had landslides. I'll bring it up for you. There's no good telling you. I can't educate you with a radio show. I can sure as frig do it with these types of presentations. Sometimes. If you're willing, only if you're willing. And you can actually find me. At a Hokkaido earthquake, 22,000 people avoid. We'll just bring up. It was a fascinating earthquake, and what was fascinating about it was they downplayed it. So here's earthquake buries homes under a landslide in Hokkaido. 22,000 people were involved in the rescue, and a 6.6 magnitude, which is the international scale, not the Japanese scale. But when you go over to Wikipedia, it's a 6.7, was a maximum intensity of 7. 6.7 and a maximum intensity. So it was an actual 7. It was a 10 on the International Richter scale. There was 130 aftershocks. And a 6.7 on the Japanese scale, but they get the M in front of it, which is the magnitude, which is not the Shinzu scale, which is a 9.5 if they're just trying to confuse, and they were. That's what they've done that way for. That was to confuse you. Now, this was the most bizarre pictures you're going to ever see, where all the mountains had lost their payloads. I've never seen a picture like that in my life. So up close, that looks like this, right? And you can see the damage in the community. This is not a 6 earthquake. This is a 9.5. When you drop all the mountains on all sides as far as you can see, that's a catastrophic event, okay? They hid that. The population worldwide has no concept that happened in 2018. They really don't. And you have never seen pictures where it lost all the payloads on each side of the mountains before, have you? And most people that follow earthquakes have no concept that had happened just a couple of years ago, 4 years ago. Now the problem with that, what made that so significant, I'll show you, was in Japan. That's where, I'll put it on the big screen because that's a bit better for you before we jump into the next stuff. So you can see where the Tomari nuclear power plant is to. You can see the X up there where ground zero is to. Look again where the nuke plant is to. It's not very far away. It's like 20 miles away. Was that nuke plant. And so that's why they downplayed it and buried it. No pun intended. Because they didn't want the world, right, to say, hey, you are playing with idiot machine by keeping nuclear reactors in an area where this can happen. And it happened. It actually happened in 2018. So don't think they're not going to lie to you, because that's exactly what they're going to do. And then March 16th, 2022, last year, this shook the whole country, plus the area that I just showed you again with a strong 3. But a 3 on the international scale is not too bad, right? You couldn't care less. But a 3 on the Shinzu intensity scale is 7. You will care about it, trust me. Which is why we got a poll tonight, by the way, also. Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? That's actually unequivocally, unassailably the fact. And bless everybody that voted. I see the censorship is strong today. Just because the numbers are not there don't mean that we don't have the reach. You seen how bad my numbers were yesterday? There was actually 1.7 thousand people, which is a typical number for the beginning, for the end of my video that came by my site. So that didn't change, but the number did. Listen, anybody who watches a single show of this are hardcore, because we're only talking about facts, and that's unusual in this planet, unfortunately, horrifyingly. If you watch this 5 times a week, you are unbelievably educated. You're the most educated people conceivable, and you are not going to be manipulated by anybody. You are an educated, extremely educated compared to the average victim out there that has been lulled into complacency since birth. Japan's earthquake knocks out power to millions, prompting. So that headline was very prevalent again, right? Calling it a 7.3. So at this stage of it, I was going through. We're trying to find out, did they have another Hashido type event, right? And they did. for sure. It was violently shaking buildings in Tokyo. 36 miles below it, 60 kilometers below the surface. So we see a lot of that. We just zoomed through it. From 63, the Japanese one, they said, was 500 times more energy than Wednesday's quake. But that's not true, is it? That actually is not true, see? Because they're pretending that it's the international scale, not acknowledging. You know, you're not going to shake Tokyo 220 kilometers away from Fukushima, 240 kilometers away from the earthquake itself, violently, and knock out power to millions of homes, unless it's a significant earthquake. You damaged 5,000 schools, 900 plus parts of the railway track had to be repaired. I think that qualifies as a significant earthquake. Particularly when you got, I accidentally brought that in. When you got fragile reactors at ground zero. And that's what he lied and manipulated and successfully buried the truth about it. And we're doing a recap, so we're not going into great detail like we did originally. Originally, we were methodical when we grabbed all available stories on it and looked for the patterns to see if we can figure out whether this was a real event. Because you got to start worrying about radioactive fallout. You got to avoid letting your pets outdoors for the next couple of weeks after an event like that in Japan. And Japan, of course, has lost the race. You know, it won't be long before the world refuses to call them humans again. Earthquake jolts Japan's northeast coast, cuts power in Tokyo. It rocked the buildings in Tokyo. People too strong for people to stand. A 6+ on the Japan seismic shaking intensity scale. Too strong for people to stand. Rattling buildings in the capital. But ground zero, where it had to go past to get to Tokyo, it caused no adverse effects. I can't sit with that kind of dishonesty. I really can't. And expect major aftershocks, right? The Tohoku earthquake and tsunami of 2011, the Sendai earthquake, was close to that same area, but it was on the fault line itself. It was 29 kilometers deep and 72 kilometers off the coastline. So it was close, but it wasn't on the fault line like that one we were just talking about. It was right on the fault line where the tectonic plates had let go. And that caused the displacement of the water. And so the tsunami comes in at 400 or 500 miles per hour, multiple ones. The first one updates the communities, next one rolls right on top of it. And there was many of those types of tsunamis that came through. And there was thousands of aftershocks on top of that over the next number of months. So everything was liquefaction and... Let's keep it rolling here. So again, they're talking about, now they're again mentioned, because remember earlier they mentioned the fire alarm went off at number 5 reactor. Number 5. But what about reactor 3 and reactor 4? You sure there was no issues there? Because you can be sure there was. And you can be sure that released a plume into the environment and criticality. While water pumps to the spent fuel pool at reactor 5, at 2 of the 4 reactors at Fukushima, the Daini plant was flooded with radioactive water. The only way it can be radioactive if they had an event. Just water in there won't automatically become radioactive. There had to be a significant release from multiple buildings to have that type of attribute. Major earthquake hits Japan, no tsunami threat to Oregon. 2 million homes without power. The region's last uninhabited town returns to live there on a trial basis. Decontamination has been carried out. Again, the time of Fukushima, south of 2 kilometers south of multiple nuclear meltdowns, like it's normal. It's not normal. It's not academics and universities and institutions going there to study. It's sending in the most unknowledgeable, the most vulnerable. 7.3 magnitude earthquake. Again, we're looking at that stage of these headlines. It was 55 miles from that of the 2011 earthquake. So it was very close, but not on the fault line itself. But nevertheless, that's frightening that they're having earthquakes with that intensity that are not caused by continental shelf drift. Windows shattered on the streets and the train stations in Fukushima City, which is a long distance away, way past these fragile buildings, way past them. Japan hit by 7.3, and then they show you the earthquake without the damage in that particular one. 6.4 would be considered to be a big event, but it was quickly revealed to be a foreshock. That was their time about in 2011, referring back to it. The high intensity 6 range, which is over 6.5, which means it's a 9.5 on the international scale, with a lower 6 in Miyagi, which is a nuclear wasteland, by the way. Namagata is a nuclear wasteland too, by the way. And we got another scale map, but it looks like we're coming up in a second. Surrounding areas saw lower 5 shaking. Lower 5 is like a 7.6 earthquake. It's not lower. It is lower, but it's still vicious earthquakes. And a 4 in Tokyo. Let's bring up the... Let's see what Tokyo was like 220 kilometers away on the international scale, which was a lower 4. So we'll go 4.3, because I'm a good guy. 4.3 times, which is a lower 4, times 1.4, 1.428, right? And so a lower 4 in Japan's seismic intensity scale is a 6 on your international scale. That's a real earthquake. That's 220 kilometers away. So 220 kilometers away, you got a 6 earthquake and shaking violently the skyscrapers and buildings in Tokyo. And Miyagi, quite far away, is too violent to stand up. But at the actual meltdown reactors themselves, they put caps over this and pretended everything was back to normal, right? You're seeing that, right? They're pretending they're in the fuel pool 100 feet above the wreckage over there, which is nobody's ever going to be, even if there's nothing there. That's a lethal dose. That's a Medusa. And so these particular journalists, you can find the clips in my video. If you go to my front page and click on video, you scroll down, you see some of these 30-second clips I put up recently. One of them would have been those people pretending they're in the building that don't even exist. It was a thrust mechanism. That means one plate slipped downward beneath the others. And so on their particular version of it, they got numbers on it. So the whole country shook. Look at that. The entire country is shaken. But ground zero, where the fragile reactor buildings are too, no problem at all, Dana. Totally normal. It was a 6+ on Japanese scale. See, but they don't put that there, but 6+. So most people see, 6+. Yeah, it's pretty big, but it's not the end of the world. But that's actually a 9.5 on the international scale. So, earthquake epicenter in Fukushima nuclear power plant. That's an interesting map to put there, isn't it? It had to go all the way up by Japan in order to get to Tokyo. So it had to go past through Fukushima to get to Tokyo, 220 kilometers away, but it done all kinds of damage there, but no damage at ground zero. Oh, okay. Don't come up and say that to my face, by the way. Cracked walls seen at apartment buildings in Fukushima, 60 kilometers away. But the ground zero, where everything is fragile, totally normal there. Why would we ever dodge a bullet? You'll dodge something else so it ever comes across you. Horror footage shows them inside of rocking apartment as a massive earthquake. Inside of rocking apartment. In Tokyo, the apartments were rocking. Is you rocking? Video shows the inside of the apartment violently shaking 220 kilometers away. But ground zero, where the fragile reactors are, it had to go past that to violently shake Tokyo another 220 kilometers past that. Don't lie much, do they? 2 million homes without power, but the nuclear plant fire alarm sounded. Yeah. The industry is so used to being evil, it has no concept what a human actually is. Panic at Fukushima nuclear plant, the system disrupted by horror earthquake. Leave that up to the British, eh? They got the most salacious headlines in history. A fire alarm went off the turbine. Turbine building is not the reactor building. It's the one in front of it, in Seaside. And so that's the distraction. Well, reactor 5 is in good shape compared to these. These are completely wrecked. So they're not going to show you that and say there's a big earthquake. You know what I mean? You mean what I know? It's disgusting. Anyway, that was the propaganda that they were feeding out. Reports of violent shocks in the Capitol buildings, 220 kilometers away. But ground zero, right alongside of the fragile buildings, no shaking there. 5,000 schools got cracked open, sure, all over the country, but not ground zero. Dana. Why would you have bullet trains in a country with these attributes anyway? Power in a large part of eastern Japan. The operators for the Daiichi said the homeless were checking for any possible damage from the earthquake. The homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language, because the nuclear scientists are not going to go there or anywhere near it. If you try to get them within where you can actually see the plant, they'll claw your eyes out of your head trying to get away. There's zero possibility you're going to get them. It shook all the businesses in Tokyo and all kinds of cities and communities far, far away. But ground zero, totally safe, ain't it? The homeless are the best employees when it comes to nuclear meltdown. BBC Jimmy Savile, the rape machine of the UK, they raped like 1,100 kids in the basement of BBC. More propaganda. It was too forceful for people to stay in the capital, 220 kilometers away. Trains were derailed far, far away. Ground zero, no problem. Tremor, they call that a tremor. It was an actual earthquake. Emergency servicing updated. There was 200 people died. It came out over the next number of days. Propaganda, no abnormalities detected after Wednesday night's earthquake at the damage. Okay, well, you can call it damage, but I call it destroyed, wouldn't you? Is that not destroyed? There's supposed to be 190 feet high buildings. There's 2 stumps. At best, you can call them stumps. Japan hit by tremor, by terrorist earthquake. Fire alarms going off at the number 1 plant, which is Daiichi, the right one. Again, the propaganda was strong, right? Quoting TEPCO, which doesn't even exist, it was nationalized after the meltdowns. He went bankrupt right away. But rather than blame the nuclear industry, they kept it figuratively alive, so you can blame this company that can be dissolved. Oh, well, we're bankrupt, and there goes all the nuclear industry's trouble. You got to blame the nuclear industry, not TEPCO. Don't blame TEPCO. Blame the nuclear industry. Blame Japan, but definitely blame the nuclear industry. Never forget to blame the nuclear industry. And so this was a poll we had during that time. Can Fukushima nuclear meltdowns release large amounts of radiation after a massive earthquake? That was before the show started. Somebody actually voted no. Of course they can. They don't create all... Now, look at the landslides from that particular earthquake in 2022. So pictures were starting to come out. Pictures were starting to come out. Yeah, I don't know how deep the reactor cores have gone. It's a lot of it was detonated into the environment, right, originally. Reactor 2 for sure has gone China syndrome, gone down to the earth. These were built on water tables, old riverbeds, which is solid rock, right? And they packed crushed rock above it. And they do this at all nuclear plants. So the reactor goes down and hits the water tables, and then they're flooded with water. And the idea was that would cool the reactors. But what happens as it starts hitting water, the water expands, say, 1,200 feet per liter. So it split the earth in multiple places. And that the steam coming out of the ground was lethal doses. Let me see if I can find that. I'm looking in the wrong spot, first off. Just bear with me, see if I can find it. Who knows? It's where to go. I can't, because we had to rebuild all this, right? Just give me a few seconds, see if I can find... I might have another way of finding it. Oh, there we go. Again, nuclear has no redeeming qualities. That's the sad part, right? They're just evil by nature. Let me check the volume for you. Okay.
Fukushima plants say the ground under the facility is cracking and radioactive steam is escaping through the cracks. The cooling system at the plant failed after the devastating tsunami hit Japan in March, sparking a nuclear crisis. But new evidence suggests that Fukushima reactors were doomed to cripple even before the massive wave reached them. Joining me now via...
So, to your right is the videos where they have, this is 10 sieverts per liter. Near the reactors, there's a lot of cracks in the ground. Steam, that report was splashing out of there. Steam doesn't splash out. And we have detected 10 sieverts an hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose at 6 places. So the earth was cracked wide open so much that the steam to the right is 40 times the normal speed. And the whole site had to be evacuated from lethal doses. And so every time this happens, they have to sacrifice hundreds of homeless, and they'll bring in steel and lead plates, 16 feet by 8 foot plates, and lay them all over the areas where they want the homeless to go and sacrifice themselves to. The unskilled and destitute are the hiring targets for Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Mentally handicapped are often given second-hand paper suits. Kyoto, radiation forecast can by no means be released to the slaves. Shows a radioactive cloud could spread over Tokyo. Not could, it did. Radioactive radiation forecasts withheld by the government. Releasing it would cause unnecessary panic. Like, the reason you have 100 sirens around a typical nuclear plant is so you can panic. Because that's the only thing you can do, is you need to panic so you can get out of harm's way. You can't shelter in the place. You're going to get sick and die from it eventually. Japan's government withheld radiation forecast to prevent causing a panic. They hit it because of simulation, because it was very, very bad. They done 5,500 simulations in the first couple of weeks. It's paid for by the country, by the citizens, by the victims. So I brought up to 2011 Tohoku earlier. Quake hits off Japan. We're just looking for 69. That was the original reports. What's the date? That's March the 16th. We already covered the 18th and 17th. My apologies. I did screw up. Powerful earthquake jolts. Will skim through this and get into the following days. March the 16th. Rattles, triggers, massive earthquake. A 6 earthquake is not massive. A 9.5 is massive, and that's exactly what they had. And so when they were talking about the places, I looked them up on a map. 35 miles east of Nami. 35 miles east of Nami. Nami is right alongside of Fukushima. That scale is 10 miles in your bottom right-hand corner. That scale is 2 miles. So it's 10 miles away off that shoreline, right? 35 miles off that shoreline. 10 miles from the plant was ground zero. So it was ultimately 200 people died. Was it 200 people died or seriously injured? I can't remember. We'll get to it. TEPCO, which also operates the Daiichi plant, said workers found no abnormalities. No abnormalities in these fragile buildings. First off, you can't quantify the assertion because it's a lethal dose. You can't get in there and check. Not even Spider-Man or the Hulk can go in there and check, okay? And when you see the word Mari Yamaguchi, you're dealing with real life evil. That's you're in the thick of it. That's evil and personated. Oh, we got a poll tonight. Is nuclear power plants designed... I should put our nuclear power plants, I guess, in that one. Designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout. Hang on, wait for it. Should be a plutonium model coming up. Oh no, there's two. That's Neptunium-239. That decays to plutonium in about 40 days or 87 days. I can't remember for 239. This one is plutonium, though. This is another model of radioactive plutonium covering the entire planet. So this is why we're asking these types of questions. Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? And another reason is they're surrounded by farms. Another reason is the plume doesn't just land in farms. It doesn't just stop there. The plumes cover the entire planet. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide hemorrhaging into the environment. They claim there was no adverse effects, no abnormalities at the country's nuclear power plant. You can't quantify that kind of assertion because it takes days to investigate a big sites. And powerful earthquake is not a 6, and it's not a tremor. So this was original headlines. I kind of screwed up by for some reason. Didn't check the dates when I was importing everything. This is one of the videos. Let's play that. Why not? I'm going to check the volume for you. I got another video there. I like that headline, but that's not what I was expecting. Right? TEPCO, no abnormalities found at crippled nuclear power plant. An actual headline from the major media. No abnormalities found at crippled Fukushima nuclear plant. An actual headline. We see this all the time with big earthquakes worldwide, by the way. No abnormalities. Yeah, but the whole country shook for extended periods of time with multiple aftershocks, and ground zero was fragile reactors. 3 and 4 are just 2 of them, right? There's multiple reactors melted down in fuel pools at the nuclear facilities. 1:30 a.m. You're not going to go check a nuclear meltdown site at 1 o'clock in the morning and quantify an assertion like that. See? TEPCO said the cooling equipment at the plant, well, the cooling equipment is just running water over the melted reactor cores. That gets washed straight out into the ocean. Nothing goes in the tank. You're pouring water over a melted reactor core. It's called a curium. So are the isotopes, a lot of them, not all of them. The biggest byproduct of just the irradiated fuel rods before they melt down are curium isotopes. And when it melts down, that is the biggest, not iodine, not cesium. Cesium is a nasty, but it's part of the deception. You're excluding alphas, betas, neutrons, X-rays, and only acknowledging a single gamma. That's not science. That's voodoo on a whole different scale. The utility observed no changes in the measurements at radioactive monitoring posts and radioactive dust monitors in the plant's compound. Think about that statement. Because there was a massive release, so they wouldn't be coming out with a story dedicated to it. TEPCO said water levels temporarily dropped in the tank connected to the spent fuel storage pool. They're talking about the common spent fuel pool, which we know was destroyed. Maybe I can find you some of that. Hang on. And see, when we were doing that, we might as well go all the way. I don't know if it's them 2 pictures. I can't see. Oh, that's before and after pictures. Hang on. That's not it. I shouldn't do it because we got too much news to get through, but if we're talking about it, then sometimes it's better if I put the extra effort in. Let's face it, it's all a massive effort. I don't mind at all. I got no issues. I just worry that, I don't want to make it any more painful than it already is. Ah, these are it. Oh, we're in the green here. Perfect. Oh, you know what I got done here? What have I got done here? Let's bring all of this in. Might as well make it messy. We made it this far. What's the difference? Extra 6 or 7. Smoke and steam rising from all 4 reactor units. So these are pictures that got released. I'm going to walk you through this. There's about 7 of them. That's the remains of reactor 4. That's the remains of reactor 3. That's the stack we were talking about earlier. And up in the corner, pixelated, all of these are pixelated out. Now, you didn't notice that when you're looking at the original pictures because they're from a drone, so you're pretty high up. They were very high quality. So I started zooming in and I was like, oh my God. And this is the only spot on the entire planet. There's nobody that I can find else on the entire planet is going to show you these pictures. That's reactor 4 up there. And you'll find a link in my description. I link you to the original pictures, which is from TEPCO, by the way. No, that's the common spent fuel pool they're talking about. That's up there in the corner, completely pixelated. Why would you pixelate the building, which is on the same level as the reactors? So they would have got washed away. And they have decades of reactor cores. to give you some context, in the background, you can see transport truck containers piled up. That gives some kind of scale, right? Fukushima radioactive inventory is 30 to 40 times as high as Chernobyl. Actually, just the fuel pool was that high. 6,375 spent assemblies, but they don't have a repository anywhere, let alone Japan. And so the pools are stuffed. And America has 70 of these reactors. They do the same thing. They're stuffed. So there's up to 3 to 4 times more fuel, which means they're boiling off a hell of a lot more water into the environment each day than the brutal 120,000 liters. You got 120,000 liters from 1,000 pools. So 1,000 times 120,000 liters. Each liter is trillions of anthropogenic, man-made, harmful isotopes are vented, released into the environment up tall, skinny stacks each day. Earthquake light appears in the sky above Japan's city. The earthquake was so powerful it created a flash over the northern Japanese city of Sendai. Like that's a serious earthquake. That's not a 6 earthquake, that's a 9.5, right? And the importance of it is, I better get that picture. I might never find that picture again. I might have to go back. Once I scroll somewhere, then I might never find the pictures I needed. Hang on. There it is. I'll copy, paste. And to give you some context, in those 2 pictures, they put covers on them, right? That's reactor 3 over there, reactor 4. But as you can see, they didn't clean it up. They put these covers they made off-site, brought it there, and then pretended that it looked like to your left, not to your right. Just because you put covers over it, don't mean it's going to look like that. And doesn't mean that it doesn't look like this, because it's never going to not look like that unless the earthquake drops it. Now, those structures that they put over it don't physically touch it because they're too fragile. Like, the lies are so important and so pertinent, and that's why these recaps are just fantastic, where you get a whole lot in just a short period. No abnormalities found at the crippled building, but you can't quantify that in the middle of the night at 1:30 a.m. in the morning. You can't quantify that kind of assertion, see? Let's move. Next story. Powerful quake rattles Japan. Still March the 16th, unfortunately. And now I done the anniversary. We didn't cover it yesterday or today because that was a separate video. I didn't make a folder, so I apologize. We covered a little bit, and we'll cover a bit more in a little tiny bit here. Japan hit by 7.3 magnitude earthquake. And again, I was going through all of this looking for documentation. So 6.4 earthquake. Well, that's a magnitude. And 6.4 is not going to be equivalent to a upper 6 on the Japanese scale, which is a 9.5. So the idea is to make it confusing, is make it inconceivable. When you look at the models, this is the Washington Post, a small earthquake doesn't shake the entire country violently, see? Upper 6, the high intensity range, which meant that 220 kilometers away, people in Tokyo couldn't even stay on their feet. But the fragile, destroyed reactors were perfectly fine. Of course they were. Hits off the coast. Now it hit in the dark, not in the light. What was that picture? That's an unusual shot right there, actually. Because you can see reactor 5 and 6 up here. Very rare. And these tall stacks, that one was pixelated, so was reactor 6, by the way. And reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4 are over there. See the stacks over there? That's an older picture because they spent a whole year to cut one stack off because it was cracked almost in two and ready to fall. But the problem was at the base of it was 25 sieverts per hour, which is a lethal dose. They got the wall in some places is 100 feet high. People in the communities can't even see the ocean. All you got is a great big wall to look at. What's the point of putting a nuclear reactor in a zone like that? Well, it's on a fault line. Almost all Earth nuclear plants are on fault lines. Makes them work better, apparently. And I used to always wonder whether that was true or not, but it must be because this is what we're seeing worldwide. Earthquake jolts Japan. Not a prefecture, but Japan. And the dates are important when they got them. March the 17th, okay, and we're getting somewhere now. Day 2. We already covered a little bit of day 3. We'll get more of that coming up. Authorities earlier said a fire alarm was triggered at the turbine building. Well, the turbine building doesn't work. This was shaking in Miyagi, which is quite a distance away from the actual reactors. And in between, it shook the shit out of that, shook the shit out of Tokyo on the other side, but didn't shake the fragile buildings of Fukushima. It's a pretty neat trick and a pretty despicable lie, a pretty deceitful, dishonest, disingenuous lie. Road signs sway as earthquake shakes Japan. Let me see. He's freaking out. The whole thing was shaking. Death toll was 88 injured. It was 200 injured. That's right. Over the next couple of days, the numbers comes out. And it takes about a week before you start seeing the statistics, which was over 900 to 1,000 parts of the train tracks had to be repaired over a very long distance. 5,000 schools got cracked open. And there was 9,000. These were all because the insurance companies posted these numbers, right? There was a $5 billion in just insurance damage, but no damage at ground zero. Just amazing. Japan is amazing. Now 94 were injured, and they're using a magnitude of 7.4 and calling that an upper 6.5 plus on their scale, which is 7. The scales can't be different, see? And then the damage is proof. The hardest hit Fukushima prefectures, the entire prefectures, Miyagi prefectures, the entire country was shook. Ground zero, the hardest spot, which is an upper 7, which is not, there is no upper 7, sorry. It stops at 7.0. But there's a 6.0, 6.5, and then a 7, for instance, as the upper numbers. And we got multiple scales acknowledging 6 plus, 6 plus. These are Fukushima prefectures. But the fragile buildings are perfect, Dana. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the tsunami depiction. That's the earthquake, epicenter of the earthquake. So when you gather up Nami, this scale is 2 miles. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner. .4 magnitude quake hits northern Japan, tsunami risk. 7.4. And we had done the anniversary earthquake was the weekend, right? The anniversary was the end of the week previous, and then earthquake 2 dead after Japan, at least 90 injured. That number went up to 200 over the next couple of days. In some areas, it was too forceful for people to stand, and buildings rattling in the capital of Tokyo, 220 kilometers away. And it had to go through Fukushima to get to Tokyo. which that model shows you, obviously. And stick you in a little... So there's lots of damage everywhere but at ground zero. And this is a very dangerous thing, to pretend that this is not happening and won't happen again, and that they won't come out and manipulate you and deceive you and lie to you again. Now the number's up to 100. Is there any 107 people injured? No abnormalities at the nuclear plant. Broke the shit out of the rest of the country, but nuclear plants are all good. I got no idea. Koriyama, which is a nuclear wasteland, by the way, they didn't evacuate that. Then Taipei Times, they're going to stab you in the back. They're only good for that. That's all they seem to be they're really good at, stabbing you in the back, we notice, over the years. Workers at the Fukushima Daiichi plant reported that tanks holding radioactive water were out of alignment, and a steel beam might have fallen. Again, this is distraction, right? Underneath the facades that they got over it, it looks like that. The official story is both of those pictures are the official pictures. Which one do you think is real? Arnie Gunnarsson picking the one on the left. He made the assemblies for the fuel pools. If he doesn't know they're gone, who does? And his wife was a spokesperson for 20 years for the nuclear industry. Pro-nuclear as they get. So done all kinds of damage very far away. But we're to believe... I got pretty censored for those videos. Now they got me censored like I don't even exist anymore. That's all you can do. Not much I can do about it. We just got to keep the pressure on the nuclear industry. Never back off the pressure. That's what we do here. We keep the pressure on the entire nuclear industry. We are the International Atomic Energy Agency's ghost. The International Atomic Energy Agency is the very last friend you want to have on this planet. They've done nothing but sedition against the entire planet and the species since their existence for 80 years. We have confirmed some structural damage at parts of the site, said Fujitsu spokesperson. Nissan, that was the Nissan plant they were showing earlier. Yeah, they had Nissan plants broken apart. They had dumping older workers and will wipe out a quarter of forecast profits. 50-something staff aren't wanted. Oh yeah, the people who built the country dedicated their whole life to making your country successful. And in Japan, you work overtime for free all the time. When you get 50, they throw you away like you're a paper towel. Yeah, that's a great company to work for. Putting bullet trains in a country with thousands of earthquakes a year. Yeah, you're not asking for something stupid to happen at all. Video shows Japan earthquake killed 4, injured dozens. Now the number is up to 4. It actually goes up to 200 injured. A 6.1 magnitude. Again, they love, and they'll do it. They'll often use the magnitude and the Shinzo scale in the same paragraph, let alone the same story. We see that quite regularly. There's all kinds of damage all over the entire country, but not at ground zero. That's a friggin' miracle, isn't it? There's got to be an act of God, for goodness sakes. Damage everywhere but the nuclear plant. Damage hundreds of miles away, but no damage at ground zero. Amazing, you ask me. Japan shouldn't allow another nuclear leak cover-up after the Fukushima earthquake. I remember that story, actually. Japan shouldn't allow another nuclear leak cover-up. Because that's what was going on and that's what was happening. This wasn't a leak. This was an event. Every time I hear the word leak, I want to strangle Arnie Gunnarsson, Helen Caldercott, Christopher Busby, and the rest of those who deceived us for all these years. And they were put on a pedestal, weren't they? The best way to screw over a country is roll out people like Arnie Gunnarsson, Helen Caldicott, Christopher Busby. Talks in a very soft voice. Except for Helen Caldicott, she always sounds like a crow, just about to die. Media outlets pass off an old image of powerful earthquake in Japan. Media. What do you think Arnie Gunnarsson is doing? He's pretending it looks like the building to the left and not the right. You don't call him out for that. The degenerate, despicable, disgusting, revolting IAEA. No safety concerns at nuclear power plants after a powerful earthquake. No safety concerns. Lie to you. Treated water. Look, they had the IRA against to mention the word treated waters. The biggest funder of the anti-nuclear war program is taking its money away. I don't remember what that story is about. Let's see. No to war in Ukraine. Joe Biden has sought to reassure Americans a nuclear exchange is unlikely, and he's probably right. But the cost of such a war, we're talking about a potential extinction level event. A potential extinction level event. Do you know what that would look like? I'll show you. Maybe I won't. Hang on, what did I get done here? Oh, yeah. I just want to see if I accidentally removed one of those. Hang on, here we go. This is 19 days of radioactive fallout. The model, I must have took it out, never put it back. Oh, there it is. I like that French model because that model really tells the story. That's 16 days of radioactive fallout from Japan. So a nuclear war is not going to create plumes like that, by the way. A nuclear bomb is 10, 20 kilograms. These are tens of millions of pounds. These are worse than all the nuclear bombs on the planet combined. It's perpetual, see? A nuclear bomb is a millionth of a second. It might consume 2 million tons of dirt and atomize and aerosol and ionize and radiating it and distribute it, right? But a nuclear plant never stops. It's pure uranium, pure plutonium. It's in perpetual motion. It doesn't need oxygen. It burns at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And just one of them is the worst case scenario for our planet. You know, again, my biggest fear is we find a planet similar to ours in the nuclear industry. Well, let's get a nuclear plant up there. Can't have that in our solar system life. Can't have anything beautiful with nuclear around. Another potential meltdown in Fukushima. As a result of another possible tsunami. What about the earthquake you're having? Fukushima bridge damaged by powerful earthquake. And let me put that on a big screen. But ground zero, it had to go past, the earthquake had to go past the fragile reactors to do the damage to the bridge. Jack the bridge way up in the air, look at that. Wow. So it dropped the bridge, or raised the bridge, I'm not sure. It shifted the bridge. A bridge! That's a huge bridge we're talking about. It shifted it. That's not going to be easy to fix. Tore apart the road, raised it and dropped it. It's a huge bridge. Excuse me. So that's far, far away. But ground zero, it done nothing, no damage to them, but it shifted a massive bridge far, far away. Well, that's just amazing, you ask me. That's fantastic. Thank God for nuclear power plants is all I can say. Thank God for disease factories is all I can say. Yeah, that's really something. And so get your focus on the tanks. Don't think about the reactors. Yeah, there was an extra 865,000 cancers in the first year that they know about. Not that everybody got health care. Not that everybody was diagnosed. Not that cancer is only one of 1,800 illnesses. So when I asked that question, of course, are nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? There's only one possible answer. And it's a terrifying reality that unless the world comes to its senses, we're all going to suffer that fate. Tokyo announces, well, we already are, basically. Tokyo announces more suspensions at 8 assembly lines due to the quake, Toyota, rather. 8 assembly lines. 18 lines at 11 factories will be idle for 3 days between Monday and Wednesday. So it damaged all kinds of facilities. And as you start going through this whole archive, here's a strange one, because Japan normally doesn't go this route. Japan aims to block sex offenders from jobs in schools and childcare. That's not a... They got to come up with legislation because they didn't have it. They were waiting for their children to retire from teachers before they brought it into effect, obviously. Why are potassium iodine pills selling like crazy? Because they had a massive earthquake in Japan where there's multiple nuclear reactors already melted down and fragile. Acetate. Japan turns down the heat and dims the lights to avoid power cuts after quakes. Yeah. Since last week's quake, what's the date on that? You'll never know the date on that. That's March the 21st. Alcoholic sake butter appears in Japan. Like anything to do with food from Japan, your supermarkets in Canada are completely full of it, by the way. Canada removed all restrictions on the nuclear wasteland after 93 days, while 55 countries banned it in 14 prefectures, not just Japan's prefecture. The rule of thumb is don't eat anything from Japan. Oregon recreation prohibited from harvesting sea stars. Well, there's only a couple of species left, and that one's not healthy at all. That one's not even a tiny bit healthy. Look at it. That's one of the few species left on the coastline, right? The hell am I? Oh. Wait for it. We'll get there. Bear with me. Here we go. I'll show you the quick version. Quick and dirty. There's no such thing, obviously, right? Okay, here we go. Look, we've done research expeditions for years and years, from Vancouver, British Columbia, to Alaska, and all points in between the 27,000 islands. And I went up there and meandered through these islands, so to speak, year after year after year, for many, many months at a time. And the species to your left is what it should look like, the entire coast. And to the right, you can see this is actually an extinction event. There's no color left on the coastline. The pictures to the right are, I repeated that over and over year after year, and the species never come back. Are the species to the left worth sacrificing so we can have nuclear power? That's the only question that needs to be answered. Is it worth exterminating all of these species permanently? Is that worth it to have nuclear power? Because that's what we already got done. That's never coming back. And those research expeditions are up at my website. The nuclearproctologist.org is linked below. This is Fukushima. That's 2011. This is 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. You can see the carnage. It's absurd to suggest that nuclear is anything but what it really is. It's an extinction event. This is why we got a poll. Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? Well, the evidence is overwhelming exactly what's going on, right? That's unassailable. We've done the research. There's no maybes, no ifs, no ands, no buts, no double check here. Okay, we got to put this in a second gear. Sri Lanka deploys troops as fuel shortage sparks protest. So instead of telling people there's nothing we can do about it, they got to roll out the troops, the military. So it doesn't take them long to use the military against you, does it? And the military is happy to participate. 59% fear attacks on nuclear plant in Japan. Talking about South Korea. Or North Korea. As if North Korea gives you... Well, first off, Japan invaded North Korea and captured it for 50 years and ruled over it. They left in 1950. In 1951, United Nations went in and bombed it. Burnt down every city with napalm. Destroyed the country. Millions dead, millions missing, millions in refugee camps, millions unaccounted for, millions wounded. And for 70 years now, they've had land, sea, and air embargoes against North Korea. And so North Korea is going to say nasty things about Japan, right? Popular caramel maker sues foreign workers for calling a strike. Let me see if I can flush that out on top of my head why that's there. Aikido is seeking better living conditions. That's the standard. They use a lot of slave labor in Japan. Retaliatory action. Power outage alert in Japan amid quake damage, cold weather. Mari Yamaguchi again. This is March the 22nd. This is 6 days after the quake, by the way. But there's no damage at ground zero. Ground zero, everything good. Let me see what updates you give us on this. Reminder, deadly March 11 quake. Yeah. Several plants are still down, might not resume operation for several months. But ground zero, where the fragile reactors are, everything's totally, completely fine. Where was that? Just smurfed up. Yeah, Mari Yamaguchi. Let me gather up those chummies again. Oh, I left it, eh? Oops. I put it over here so this time I wouldn't have that happen to me. Wait for it. So 6 days later, there's still no damage at these destroyed buildings, but everything else in the country is wrecked. Down for several months. For ground zero, everything's perfect. Thank God for the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language being so articulated at the nuclear meltdown. They warned on Tuesday, 6 days later, as many as 3 million homes could lose electricity after 8 p.m. But don't worry, you got the power at the nuclear plant. Everything's going to be good. The homeless said so, man. The heroes of Japan are the homeless. The heroes in the nuclear industry are not the Hulk. They're not Spider-Man. They're the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language. Bless their hearts. We stand in solidarity with you. Japan narrowly avoids blackout and warns power squeeze and is not over. I'm just looking for a follow-up on whenever I see this now, because we're 6 days later, the real number starts coming out. Notice regarding the impact of Fukushima coastal earthquake. Oh, that was the insurance company? Yeah, this is the insurance, Dika Corporation. That's right, that's the insurance. So this is only 6 days later. Or is it? No, it's another company. Plans to resume operation in May. This is March when that happened. Yeah, it's too early for the insurance company. That comes up a couple of weeks after this. Which struck Fukushima. Interesting connotation. Quake bullet train line to fully resume before Golden Week, which is a long way away. 17-car bullet train derailed. More than 100 workers were dispatched to the derailment site. It turned out after it was over 900 cracks in the tracks. They still hadn't got it on the track after 7 days. Absorbed doses. So this is United Nations UNSCR, United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of the Atomic Radiation. These are the most degenerate, despicable, hateful scum you'll ever hear tell of on the entire planet. Is the people on UNSCR and IRPA and the IPCC and the IAEA. These are all United Nations, by the way. Their job is to destroy your planet. Not maybe, not a little bit, but to destroy your planet. Average disposition of cesium. So, like, you can't just talk about cesium, and that's the numbers per square meter. And that's the population, and that's the community over there. So these communities weren't, they didn't move them out of the community. They just raised the limits and said, no, it's safe. It's safe. Now we raised the limits. You'll be okay. Raised the limits 70 times higher than it was pre-Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. Like in Fukushima City, almost 300,000 people with over 230,000 becquerels of just gamma. As if alphas and betas and neutrons are not going to be in that same number. They're going to be exact same numbers. These are nuclear wastelands. Rather than evacuate them, they kept them there. And in fact, in Koriyama City with 341,000 people, at 162,000 becquerels per square meter of just gamma, but out of the 341,000 people, I think it was 90,000 homes, not counting apartment blocks and everything else. 90,000 homes, 90% of them were eligible for decontamination. But they didn't have the homeless to do it. You can't decontaminate a home, and you can't decontaminate a community, and you bloody well can't decontaminate the farmlands. And when you see these symmetrical numbers in all these communities, do you really think that the radiation was flying around looking for communities? Do you, like, the significance of what I'm trying to tell you is you're talking about not just those communities, you're talking about the entire planet. And that's 19 days later. No, that's why we have these polls, right? Is nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? And there is no maybes about that. The industry is going to come in and try to persuade you. They're going to take away my viewers to try to persuade you it's not worth your time to watch. The best thing you can do is get educated, and you need this education. Make no mistakes about it. Inhalation plume. You got these massive numbers over there, but nobody has inhalation. No, barely any ingestion. Unclear, ERPA and the IPCC and the IAEA made this model to manipulate you. How can you deny? Do you really think that number over there, say Date City at 147,000 becquerels a square meter, is going to translate into per square meter? Are you going to stand in the same place for the rest of your life? So every square meter. These are catastrophic numbers. Nobody should be in these cities. And to suggest that there is no adverse side effects from living in that environment is criminal. It's 100% criminal. It's not tenable. It's not sustainable. And it's not a future you want to experience, I can tell you right now. Look at this place, surrounded by farms. Britain wants to resume nuclear power as all, not looking forward, but after all their reactors are already decrepit and ready to shut down. That's not a nuclear renaissance, that's desperation. And they can't build their own reactors. Cultivating a cultural awareness among medical educators. You don't want to know. Fukushima Medical Universities. Literally the last people on the entire planet is a university you want to be putting your faith into. The very, very, very last people on this entire planet. It would be like Chernobyl on steroids. The spent fuel catches fire. Says engineer who worked at the identical plant. Each reactor fuel pool, there's 2 fuel pools at the top of each building. Each fuel pool holds 3,450 spent fuel assemblies. Each assembly is at least 1,800 pounds. This is the alleged picture of number 4 reactor fuel pool. Let me show you reactor 4 it looks like. It looks like that over there, not like this here. And these people are beyond criminal for what they've done. The media is that the CNN, ABC, BBC, CBS, the videographers, the producers, the editors, everybody had to participate. All media worldwide had to participate for them to be able to publish those types of videos. There was no dissenting opinions. Well, there was one. It was a single one. I'll play it for you. It's very short. It's by one of the most famous anti-nuclear activists the world has ever seen, Helen Caldicott. And her job is to convince you that it looks like that over there, not like what it actually looks like. I put those 2 pictures there. She's being interviewed and asked, does it really look like the building to the left or does it actually look like the building to the right? And Helen, lunatic Helen, who sold millions of books with propaganda galore.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
There is nobody going to get up there and walk around. And same by robots, which is humans, A bi-robot is a human. It's not a robot. Normally they won't say the word human in the same conversation. They say bi-robots, which is an actual human. They describe you as a bi-robot when they need somebody that's disposable. You have every right. Look, I provide so much documentation, and I do it 5 days a week. And I'm grateful that I get an opportunity to do it because I'm not going to lie to you. And that the ones who censor me are terrified of the truth. They're so disconnected that hiding the truth, despite the fact that they weren't even involved in it, but hiding the truth because they're in the nuclear industry shows you how dangerous this industry actually is, how disconnected. There is no nuclear renaissance, right? But we can't pretend this didn't happen. Japan pretending it didn't happen is not a solution, right? We've run through these headlines. Government answers, and we'll call it a day. We got some good news today, big time. I'll get to that in a minute. Government answer to protecting children in Fukushima from radioactive fallout: wear long-sleeved shirts. So if you have a nuclear meltdown, your children are instructed to wear long-sleeved shirts. Like, that's so disconnected from any common sense. It's hard to imagine that the country didn't rally and hang these people in the streets. Japan's safety standards and radiation levels for children are unconscionable. They raised the levels for children 70 times higher than the sack of shit World Health Organization, aka United Nations, already had it set at, which was already artificially inflated because of accidents over the years. It's hard to imagine something more frightening than 90,000 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds with dosimeters that they can't even read strapped around their neck. It's for the university nuclear students to look at later and gloat about. Rain from Fukushima exceeded Chernobyl in Oregon. Now at levels unknown to humans or machines. Human right violation, unequivocally. New York Times contributor confirmed California rainwater 181 times above the absurdly inflated drinking water standards for brutal radioactive iodine 131. There would have been 10 times more 132 and 30 times more 133 and 31 times more iodine 129 there was. We got the studies of it. And that the 132 and 133 are actually 9 times more effective at ionizing and radiating the thyroid gland than the brutally effective 131 is. I apologize for the great news that the system is insane. And that radioactive fallout and rain was 10 times more than originally reported. And the numbers were 220 million atoms per liter for iodine 129, which meant all the insects and birds and animals and mammals and humans and babies and children, thyroids were saturated with anthropogenic iodines, which means they're producing radioactive hormones, and so are all the pregnant birds and insects and animals and mammals and humans. And it takes a decade or two for it to play out, and they become sterilized. And now, when was the last time you seen a flock of birds on migratory? When was the last time you seen crows landing on your roof and driving you nuts? When was the last time you seen a renaissance in the fisheries? It's collapsed symmetrically worldwide. Rain out of hot particles from radioactive clouds continue for another year, not just in the Pacific. No, this is worldwide. The models I showed you already. Here's NOAA's model. Here's NOAA's model. I'm going to speed it up. This is based on 40 days when it stops. We're going to boot right through it. The model is only based on venting. It's not based on the actual inventories. Officials admit deadly Fukushima meltdown cover-up 2016. It's an unpardonable breach of trust. It's an unprecedented nuclear disaster. It's as bad as it gets. As bad as it gets. There's the understatement of history. The largest amount of Fukushima radiation fell on the U.S. No, not just the West Coast. It was the entire planet. Why are they always surrounded by farms? Why do they hate you so much? Why do they hate us so much? You know, United Kingdom removed restrictions on baby food and cereal from the nuclear wasteland 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years before they removed it for the rest of the population. If that's not hating children, what actually is? A lone voice in the dark. That's what we are right here. And we fear nothing. I fear nothing. The truth is way more scarier than the death threats that I've been living with all my life, and particularly the last decade. The endless assault, the endless attacks upon my reputation and my name, the censorship. You know, the truth dictates that I don't have a right to stop. That's the facts. I don't have a right to give it up. I don't have a right until the planet wakes up and is honest. And in one sense, you know, say there was 1,000 people started telling this story, I'm obligated to check them to make sure they're actually being honest and to warn people if they're not. That's how bad this actually is. And that's the responsibility that I'm blessed with. I'm blessed with this responsibility. It's a blessing. I'm privileged to fight for you and your loved ones and all the species on this planet. That's a privilege. Radiation forecasts kept secret to avoid panic in the whole of the planet Earth. And unfortunately, I got 60 more of them. I'm not going to get through them today. I'm sorry. I already ran into the ground. That's enough of that for today. I got a couple of pictures I'm going to show you in a second. Just give me a moment. I got to take what I'm doing there. I got another way I can do it. It's not cooperating right now. So we wanted to buy a 26-inch tool cabinet because my tools are scattered all over the freaking place. And it's torture. It's absolute torture. And so the sale ended today, and James Luce donated $265, which was what we needed to get the tool case. Let me bring it up for you. That's not it. Okay, so where are we to here? Here's the tool case. This is a 26-inch tool case. I have the top part for it. But that's still not going to hold all my tools, but that's the real deal right there, man. That is amazing. And so I went down today. They got one left. It's got a big dent and a big scratch in it. And they're going to drop the price for me, so I don't mind. But he said the flyer is coming out tomorrow. And so this one here, we got enough money to get this one. And this one I can put the outboard motors and the generator in that steel. It's 130 pounds. I can put all of my tools in this. It's 3 doors. And that goes on sale tomorrow. And that's what I'm going to get. That's the better one. Because that would basically hold all of my tools and equipment. Because we got so much equipment, it's hard to wrap your mind around how much I actually got to keep this operation working, right? And that's exactly what I needed. And so when he showed me the flyer there, I said, do you got any of these in stock? He said, yeah, we got 3 of them. I said, the sales starts tomorrow, does it? Yeah, he said 8 a.m. I said, I'll be here. We got Basically $60 shy, but that's okay. What we raised 520. This is on sale for 500 plus taxes, which is 575, right? I got 520 raised, saved up. And so that's a better toolbox by far, right? And so in one sense, I'm fantastic that this played out the way it did. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's what we were going to buy because it was on sale for $370. And that's a 26-inch. This is 48-inch, 4 feet by 6 feet tall. And it's lockable. And it can carry 800 pounds. And so I can put, right now I have 2 engines just sitting in the shed, small ones, the kicker outboard engines. And I would feel much better if I had all of my equipment in that and locked. And it's all at my fingertips. I got a perfect spot there for it. I went out and measured it. And that's what I'm going to do. That's a much better investment, right? Because, and it's, I was a little bit shocked that they actually had it in stock. So you got 3 different doors. And so that really caught my common sense, and I realized that's the right thing to do. I got 2 toolboxes. One is for mobile, one is stationary, right? Where we're going to get the other cabinet to put underneath it, and so you can have all your tools in the one place. But you still won't get them all into one place. But you actually will with that. You'll have everything in the one spot, and I got no more excuses. Well, it's not excuses, no more lost time. And so a heartfelt thanks to those who chipped in, particularly James Lucid, who went way above and beyond. And we'll have that tomorrow. We'll get some pictures out of that tomorrow. And the next day, maybe the weekend, we'll get the pictures out and it'll be stuffed full of equipment. That's pretty, that's quite the relief because I'm tortured looking all the time. Yeah, absorbed doses in red bone marrow is within the limits. Yeah, there's no irony to that one, is it? Yeah, it'll be bolted to the floor, bolted to the... Well, that weighs 130 pounds. There will be about 800 pounds in it. There's nobody going to come up where I'm to and going to drag it away. And it'll be bolted to the wall so it doesn't tip over and kill me some point. But I was totally shocked that we're actually going to end up with something so nice, so appropriate today when I seen we got the donation from James Lucid. As you know, that's not his real last name. It's his real first name, though, but it's not his real last name. I was pretty humbled when I realized I was actually going to get something that was going to do the job and that puts an end to my nightmare of always struggling to find things. It's hard to appreciate how much work I do each day and each week. It really is. And the only thing that stops me is when I can't find a tool for the job, right? And it could delay me by a day or 2 days or even a week sometimes because I can't find it. And eventually I'll tear up a whole bunch of clutter and find something, right? And in the last couple of weeks I have kind of organized quite a lot, but it's still scattered everywhere, right? And that's the end of that. I'm just unbelievably thrilled that we're actually going to resolve that once and for all and do it properly too, right? Because that's the better thing to do with the money we raised, is to get something that does the whole job, not most of the job. Because I can put all my tools in there, they're all going to be there at the same spots. So, and it's a steel box, the mice can't get in there. Freaking mice got me tortured. They just ruined a pair of snow pants I had, because it was going to start snowing again, by the way, starting Friday. So I'll be heading in the woods, and we got somebody who will be traveling with me in the woods fairly regularly, not all the time, I'm sure, but fairly regularly. And because, you know, you're going in the woods looking for tracks, very dangerous. We'll get out those trail cams again. Let me come back up. Let me find an appropriate picture to end this on. Yeah, I'm pretty happy. We are actually going to solve the problem. And I just didn't even think that would happen, to tell you the truth. Now it's happening tomorrow for us. Just like that. What can I say, you know? It's very humble. It's a very humble thing for me. Let's close the poll down. Are nuclear power plants designed to exterminate the planet with radioactive fallout? And that's unequivocal, yes. And I provided more than enough documentation for that assertion tonight. There's no lack in documentation. And my playlists have absolute endless amount of documentation. Let's go back to the iconic picture, I guess, before we call it a night. The iconic picture for me, anybody can guess it in their mind before I bring it up? There's a couple, dozen, 100 actually. Here's one of them. That's a very iconic picture for me. You got purveyors of death. That's what should be on their logo, by the way. You got the actual demons themselves. You got Raphael Grossi, the current sadistic demon, who is got more than enough help from the media. Here's media in 2013 pretending they're in the building that don't even exist. That should literally frighten the daylights out of you. And that radiation, man-made anthropogenic radiation, got nothing to do with a banana, which is something they rarely mention. The first couple of years after Fukushima, I personally bashed for at least 1 hour everybody that mentioned the word bananas in Fukushima. It took a couple of years. Walking in sunshine, flying on an airplane. Like, the idea of trusting a journalist or anybody from a university ever again is nil. It's absolutely nil. Zero. And that is as terrifying as Fukushima nuclear meltdown. Have a great night, a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow afternoon, the same time. I know this is not convenience for a lot of people this time of the day when you're used to 10 p.m. my time. But I'm trying to rejuvenate my brain and my body. It's working because it's a little after 6 p.m. my time instead of midnight my time. It gives me 6 or 7 hours to be normal. It's been so long since I had a normal day that this is actually helping me by doing my shows early in the day. It might go back to that time in the future, but right now we're going to stay at that time. And let's end the poll, I guess, before we do anything else. We'll call it a day at that. And again, thank you to everybody that contributed, particularly James Lucid, who's been stoic in all of this for many years. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow for the last show of the week. Great show tomorrow. More of today with lots of great stuff today. Amazing news from 2022 we covered today. And at the same time, I'm still gathering up Fukushima news cycle each day. I'm still gathering up nuclear news each day. We're going to have to do those shows periodically to keep up with. We're in 2023, right? So it'll be okay. Once I get through this, it'll take another few weeks to get through all of this recap. Then we can have a normal, if there is such a thing, show. Again, hugs for everybody. Good night, everybody. Take care. If anybody wants to contribute, we still need to raise 60. We can do without it, but it'd be nice to get that covered. And the links are in the description, the very bottom. We need to raise another 60 by rights. Don't worry, we'll get it anyway, but I'm just saying, that's the reality. Take care, folks. And if you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody